Welcome to Inclusion 2020 presented by SHRM, or the Society of Human Resource Management. My name is Kelly Mirbot. I'm an executive coach and transformative catalyst. I'm thrilled that you're here, and let me welcome you properly. So welcome to all the organizers of SHRM's Inclusion 2020. Welcome to people of all genders, including people who identify as women, trans, men, genderqueer, or others. Welcome to people of African descent, Black, African American, Asian descent, Arab descent, European descent, those who identify as Hispanic, Latinx, people indigenous to this land, and people of mixed and multiple descents. Welcome to people who currently struggle with getting access to the resources necessary for survival, like healthcare, adequate housing, reliable transportation, childcare, and people who currently have more access to those assets. People with disabilities, visible and invisible. Gay, lesbian, bisexual, heterosexual, pansexual, queer, or others for whom none of those labels fit. Welcome to your bodies and the different ways you experience yours. This may include chronic pain, strength, tension, etc. Welcome to survivors. Welcome to people who identify as activists and people who don't. Welcome to single, married, partnered, dating, in monogamous or polyamorous relationships. Welcome to those in their teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Welcome to people of different class backgrounds. Welcome to your emotions, joy and bliss, grief, rage, indignation, contentment, disappointment, love, and happiness. Welcome to those who support you to be here. Welcome to your families, genetic and otherwise. Welcome to people with different faiths, religious traditions, faith practices, private practices not belonging to a tradition, agnostics, atheists, and seekers. Welcome to those dear to us who have died. Welcome to our elders, those here in this room, in our lives, and those who have passed away. What are some of the other aspects of our diversity that you would like to welcome into this space? I invite you to put your answers in the chat box right now. Yes, and finally, I'd like to welcome the ancestors who lived in this land where we are now. I'd like to acknowledge them and invite their spirits into this place. Welcome. Now, before I get started, I'd like to lay a few ground rules. I invite you to consider silencing your cell phone and putting them away, grounding your feet, taking 3 deep breaths, and all I ask is your presence, your open mind and heart, and your participation. So imagine, if you will, it's the 1970s in Palm Beach, Florida. My father, George Burns III, not to be confused with the famous comedian, had just turned pro on the PGA Tour, and life was good. My mom, Irene Burns, had married my dad at just 22 and became his biggest champion. Although mom had given up school to settle down and start a family, she managed my father's career, contributing hugely to his success and our family's livelihood. Everyone loved her and still does to this day. My mom was a great networker. She taught me the art of the handwritten thank you note and the power of gratitude, which I still use today. And she also taught me the significance of human mental real estate. Both my mother and father came from established families with successful businesses and were well respected. I had the good fortune of meeting influential characters such as Arnold Palmer, Ogden Phipps, and the current president during my childhood. Growing up, it seemed like everywhere we went and everything we did as a family was sunshine and rainbows. Now fast forward with me 20 plus years, and I was enjoying a fabulous career in the media. I had made good use of the networking skills my mom had taught me, and the confidence I had gained from being welcomed by heavy hitters and people of great influence as my father's daughter. Doors seemed to open easily for me during this time, but I was about to face a reckoning not unlike the one we are all facing this year. I discovered that life has a funny way of leading you in the direction of your lessons, right? Giving you what you need and not what you want. I'm sure some of you can relate to that. To make a long story short, back in 2007, while working as a sales executive for one of the biggest media conglomerates in the world at the time, I'm talking close to being a media monopoly, I was accused of being a racist by one of my Black female colleagues. Unfortunately, this was not to be the last time that I would put my foot in my mouth where diversity and inclusion was concerned. But it was the moment that sparked a lifelong personal crusade to become not only an advocate of diversity and equity, but a champion of inclusivity. Things got progressively worse. I was disciplined by my boss at the time. My colleagues, for the most part, turned their backs on me, and I felt othered for the first time in my life. I was confused, angry, lonely, and sad. I knew that something else was happening, but I couldn't quite figure it out. Back then, I was unaware of how my curiosity could offend, how my lack of interest caused separation, and how my lack of research left me blind to the viewpoint of people who came from a different community to myself. This was the beginning of a personal awakening for me, not one of a spiritual kind, but one of a DEI kind. You see, the thing about coming from a privileged background is that it's your normal. I didn't see it as privileged. I often felt that I had to work 10 times harder than anyone to meet the high standards that both my mother and father had set for my sister and me. I knew that to whom much is given, much is expected. But somewhere along the line, I had been blind to the fact that I was part of the systemic problem of exclusivity in America and the corporate workplace. To make matters even worse, a year later, the cuts came and they were deep. While this was unrelated to the reason why I had been disciplined by my boss, losing my job as part of 30,000 layoffs, despite the fact that I was the top sales consultant at my company at the time, rocked my entire world. I thought I had lost a part of my identity. Talk about a teachable moment. I found myself in a dark place. I had no idea what to do next. I was frustrated. I felt out of control. In the back of my mind, I kept asking myself, where had I gone wrong? How did I find myself here? You may be wondering, how does a white woman from the right side of the tracks in Palm Beach, who is married to a male veteran of the United States Navy, the daughter of wealthy, white, upper middle class parents, one of whom is a world-class golfer on the PGA Tour, become an advocate for DEI? Now think about that for a moment. Despite feeling confused about the accusation of being called a racist and seething over the injustice of my being laid off, I knew deep down something was missing. And in that moment of time, I knew I had internal work to do. I always hear my mom's voice in my head saying, no one's going to hand you anything. You've got to work hard and earn it. Everything we were given was with the expectation that we would earn it in some way. Another great life lesson. I had seen my dad face the highest levels of stress in his sport, achieving 80 top 10 finishes and coming through triumphant with 4 PGA Tour championships. These values I still held strong, and at my lowest point, I surrendered and set out on a journey of discovery. The truth is, it took me years of soul searching, therapy, being coached, and becoming coachable. I learned to surround myself with friends and colleagues who continue to hold me accountable to this day. I consumed as many textbooks, qualifications, and courses I could find on the subject of DEI, executive coaching, and transformation. Eventually, it all came together to form a picture that was harmonious, productive, and all about belonging. Throughout this part of my journey, I began to make the connection between my mind and my heart when making decisions. I grew to understand that when I made decisions with my head, they were clinical and factual, and more often than not, cold and without feeling. When I added my heart to the equation, my decisions became more balanced, intentional, and open-minded, and allowed me to see things from different perspectives and angles rather than through a single lens or filter. Now, before you start thinking, here we go with all the woo-woo talk, here are the facts about heart and mind communication. Now, HeartMath is one of my favorite nonprofits. It was introduced to me by a great friend and colleague, Bruce Cryer, their former CEO. Here's a handful of clients that HeartMath works with: the Boys and Girls Club of New Bedford, Massachusetts, Embry-Riddle Aeronautical, the City of Dallas, Texas First Responders, and one of my current clients, the United States military. So, HeartMath's research into heart-brain communication has shown that while scientists traditionally focused on the brain-to-heart communication, a rather one-sided perspective, what we have since learned is that the communication between the heart and the brain is actually a dynamic, ongoing, two-way dialogue. Let's look at how this works. The heart communicates with the brain in 4 major ways. Number 1, neurologically through the transmission of nerve impulses. Number 2, biochemically via hormones and neurotransmitters. Number 3, biophysically through pressure waves. And number 4, energetically through electromagnetic field interactions. Once I became clear that making decisions using both the heart and the mind was effective, it became easy to understand how this could be used to introduce DEI and the notion of inclusivity, in particular to my clients and colleagues who were seeking practical applications for their department or their organizations. You see, when we look at the facts and figures on a screen, or lean into our own understanding, staying within our comfort zones, we can easily miss the opportunity to include people we would ordinarily exclude. When we pass decisions through the heart filter, we can begin to consider different metrics, reasoning, and begin to open up and explore new ways of working, welcoming, and embracing people into our teams and organizations. When I took the time to do this, I found myself drawn to the heart of people, whatever package they came in. I became an advocate for the ignored and overlooked communities within corporate America, and I began to deliver competitive advantages to my clients in the form of improved bottom lines, greater innovation, and a true sense of belonging, all of which we leveraged to create truly cohesive teams. But how do we put this into practice? In order to set up clear and effective inclusion strategies, it's important that we clarify and understand the main difference between diversity and inclusion. When talking about diversity in a workplace, we focus mainly on respecting and appreciating what makes employees different in terms of age, gender, ethnicity, religion, disability, sexual orientation, education, and national origin. Inclusion, on the other hand, includes organizational efforts to create a sense of true belonging for all employees regardless of background. Inclusive organizational culture makes people feel respected and valued for who they are as an individual or a group. We know employees who feel welcomed are often much more committed to their work and the organization that employs them. They are more motivated and have higher levels of employee engagement. We know that employees who feel welcomed are often much more committed to their work and the organization that employs them. They are more motivated and have higher levels of employee engagement. The process of inclusion focuses on making people feel valued and important. And when people feel appreciated, they function at a greater capacity and are more likely to embrace the organization's mission and core company values. There is no doubt that inclusivity, like society, is a broad landscape and one seen through a variety of prisms. It is highly complex and means a host of different things to different people. Today, I am here to assist you in nurturing belonging, awakening to your role in diversity, equity, and inclusion. At the core of it, inclusivity is exactly what it says, to be inclusive, to embrace the notion that we all belong. At the core of it all, inclusivity is exactly what it says, to be inclusive, to embrace the notion that we all belong. Aside from individual personal experience, however, the broader message about inviting, embracing, and valuing different people is not quite that simple in the reality of today's workplace. As leaders in people management, of course, you have to look at figures, follow procedures, and make sure regulations are met. But your work, your purpose-driven work, is to protect, care for, and nurture the hearts and minds of those you employ, work with, and work for. While workplace inclusivity has become one of the main challenges and top priorities of all HR departments, especially in today's working environment, the good news is that while this can be challenging, there are successful inclusive strategies in effect. The dual lens of COVID-19 and the recent murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Katherine Johnson, and many other Black Americans, too numerous to list in this presentation, this highlights the profound social justice and economic divides in the US. As a result of this, we see companies taking the steps needed to revisit and implement policies and strategies on DEI, and their responsibility to help shift a status quo stacked against Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, as well as other underrepresented populations. This tells us that even in the face of adversity, we are capable of being innovative, creative, and pulling together to ensure greater understanding and appreciation of the opportunities that inclusivity affords us all. Now I have a really fun exercise for you. All it takes is your presence and your imagination. So join me, if you will, for a moment in creating the vision of inclusion for 2020 and beyond. I invite you to consider closing your eyes if you'd like. Take 3 deep breaths. And enter the theater of your mind. And on that big silver screen, imagine, if you will, a world where there are no vertical relationships, only horizontal, where everyone was equal but different, where people didn't lead by manipulation but by example, where we didn't praise in a patronizing manner, but rather encouraged determination and discussed ways to achieve goals, both corporate and personal. Imagine an organization, your organization, where everyone feels welcome, celebrated, secure, appreciated, nurtured, and the culture is one of belonging. When you're moved to, open your eyes. Hold that vision in your mind. Let it permeate your heart, fill your mind, and occupy your soul. You see, the real lesson I learned is that growing up in a vertical world, one of exclusivity and privilege, creates distrust and fosters a scarcity mentality. When we dare to level the playing field, we can begin to create communities of trust, of respect, of encouragement, belonging, prosperity, and inclusivity. So stop for a moment and think to yourself, where am I creating distrust? Where am I creating separation? Where am I creating lack? Where do I decide for other people whether they're worthy or not? When have I made the decision that could affect somebody else's future based on vertical rather than a horizontal structure? When you're ready to, I invite you to put your answers in the chat box. I don't say all of this lightly because I understand the internal work, the effort, and the determination it takes to get everyone on board to ensure that they are all pulling in the same direction. My work with organizations such as the United States Military, the Philadelphia International Airport Leadership Team, the City of Philadelphia Planning and Development Department, Integrity Staffing Solutions, and La Colombe Coffee has taught me that it takes a team-oriented approach. The City of Philadelphia's Planning and Development Department faced the fundamental challenge of merging 9 departments into one under the umbrella of inclusivity and belonging. They had tried unsuccessfully for 22 years, but constantly came up against the fundamental challenge of separation over unification, which is why I was brought in. The existing vertical structure kept the status quo alive. Once we implemented the horizontal structure, within 11 months, the goal was achieved and all 9 departments were under the same umbrella. So you see from this case study, inclusivity is about creating a flat structure that allows everyone the space to show up as they are and move forward at their own pace. You may have leaders who are several steps ahead of others, but this doesn't mean that others are below them or behind them. It simply means that everyone is welcome to move forward in their own distinctive and unique way. Now I know there will always be a segment of people who will continue to exclude, whether publicly or in private. The events of this year alone have demonstrated that. But for those of us who are ready to move forward and create the American workplace that is efficient, productive, and a great place to be, it's time to face the problems that a lack of inclusivity has caused and override them with powerful inclusive strategies. I was gifted a powerful platform at birth, and I didn't know that by not using it for good, for example, speaking up against the issues of exclusion, racial injustice, or the racial divide, I was adding to the problem. I was complicit. My big awakening came when I woke to the idea that by holding on to the concepts and beliefs that cause separation, I was part of the problem. Again, I was complicit. I was sitting on boards that promoted diversity, equity, and inclusion. I championed the forward movement of the LGBTQ plus community and advocated for the level playing field. And in spite of all these efforts, I was contributing to the problem by the language I was using. In my mind, I was almost the perfect human. I was doing all of the right things and still saying all of the wrong things. I had to clean up my internal world. I had to make amends. I had to ask people what they needed from me. I had to be humble and apologize. I allowed my colleagues to call me forward even when it felt like I was being called out. I learned that if you are willing to acknowledge, admit, and clean up your mistakes, then people are willing to forgive. We are all a work in progress. Nobody is exempt from making change. So today, I challenge you to consider, who are you excluding? Who are you positioning beneath you on the vertical ladder? Who do you hold at a distance for fear of loss? What do you need to clean up? On your best day, how would you treat another human being? Use that as your guidepost. In closing, I would like to share one of my favorite quotes with you. This is from Rumi, the 13th century Persian poet. He said, "Yesterday I was clever. I was trying to change the world. Today I am wise. I am changing myself." This, for me, is the greatest lesson of all. Policies, strategies, and organizational reform are all great. However, we must do the internal work. We cannot skip that step. Only we can change our own perspectives, to open our hearts and minds to find a way to welcome differences and welcome the unknown. Only we can decide to embrace the possibility of a new and dynamic landscape and nurture people. We must ensure that all of us belong, no matter which part of humanity we represent. Now I live my purpose out loud. I use the platform I was so humbly gifted at by birth to do my best work. I have the difficult conversations. I spend my time coaching my colleagues and clients just like you to nurture belonging and awaken to becoming an ally and an advocate and a champion of diversity, equity, and of course, inclusion for 2020 and beyond. Thank you for welcoming me today. I look forward to working with you on your DEI strategies. I am here to answer any questions, no matter how big or small, no matter how related or unrelated they are. My contact information is available on the slide and in the handouts that you should have all received. If you haven't, please email me and we'll get them to you right away. I appreciate you taking the time today and look forward to meeting with you again soon. Make it a great day. Stay healthy, stay connected, and don't forget to love yourself and love each other.